Video will look at a scenario in which China, India, and Russia go to war with Eurasia. Well, yeah, this one needs to be a bit. Let's start in Europe, but before we do, yeah, that makes the European front better. They make more advances and they quickly move in to overthrow Belarus. With Russia quickly managing to get Belarus to surrender, they go forth in this offensive. See this front with Russia and China quickly moving to take over Mongolia by taking over Ulaanbaatar, with them rapidly gaining control of the area. The forces being built up here and here, meaning less easy to take over. But they're still just mounting at the border, because they don't have enough to succeed at anything. With India taking over Sri Lanka and Nepal, and then they go in to take over Bhutan, and then they take over Bangladesh. And after this, China starts an offensive from the north too. And well, Myanmar starts falling back, and another front opens here, with India's forces starting to enter this front too. And now let's see what Russia does in the Southern Caucasus. They have a bit of success, but with a Polish-Ukrainian offensive into Belarus, pushing them back. And well, they start pushing Russia back, but with not enough forces yet, and Russia holding it with having enough forces. With an offensive in Kazakhstan beginning, and with China coming in on this front, and Russia quickly moves in to take Astana, the capital, which they quickly manage to take over because it's a weak country of Kazakhstan. And well, they take over all of this, with India managing to cross into Pakistan, which leads them to an advantage. And well, on the Korean front, well, an offensive is launched, and somehow they occupy this already, with China getting pushed back and Russia, and them also taking over the island of Sakhalin while they were busy, and they managed to seize to here. With China infuriated, they make it much more difficult for Japan, the Philippines, and Korea and Southeast Asia to communicate by taking over the island of Taiwan. And their offensive along with India in the Southeast Asia continues, with them managing to take Hanoi from Vietnam, with this becoming the new front line. Wish I had smaller maps of some of the cities just to go to battle in, but I don't. With a front against Finland beginning, with them only managing to take over these lands. With a second successful offensive happening here, with Russia knowing that Kazakhstan could be a threat, they push into this front all the way to here, with China sending in more troops to help collapse, as China starts taking control of most of the front in this area, as so that Russia can focus on holding in Europe, and they quickly make a front line like this. And they move into the Baltics, but they fail. They also continue in Finland, with them getting pushed back by Finland. And they get pushed back on this front all the way to here. But with China starting an offensive against Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, them managing to connect the front here and push them even further. With Kazakhstan being neutralized, this just makes it harder to stop Russia. With Russia managing to advance a bit, but not much, because they're trying to secure the lands there. And they move in to take over most of Benelux. Not Benelux, the Baltics. With them moving into Armenia at this point. With a counter-offensive against India breaking out. And they managed to push India completely out of Pakistan. And then cross the border. As they cross over here. And they cross over here. With the front line being solidified. And then to prevent one from happening in Southeast Asia, India and China goes hard on collapsing them. And they manage to reach the coast and move in and take Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. And then they move down all the way and take Singapore. With the collapse happening, and this being a big deal, has just weakened their hold. Within Central Asia, a breakthrough happens down the coast of Kazakhstan, as there wasn't enough troops left in there at this point, as it's quickly falling. With them pushing down and managing to cross into Uzbekistan. With China also entering Uzbekistan and entering Turkmenistan. With a stalemate happening along this front. And during that time, China starts sending some troops to Russia. As they start pushing a bit further. As them and Europe are both starting mass mobilization. Oh my god, India's island chain wasn't even considered a part of it. With India deciding to go send some troops to help China with a landing in the Philippines. Which goes really well. As the Philippines collapses under the pressure. And they move into some of the islands around Jakarta. But they manage to land in Borneo. And take over the island. Within Europe, the front moves a bit more in Russia's favor. With Europe focusing on the European front, they didn't put enough focus in Turkey's front. As Russian forces advance a tiny bit. As they start moving into Afghanistan from the north. Which helps India in its counter-offensive against Pakistan as less forces are getting in. So they launch one here and here to the border. And with these two control points on the border, they manage to move over here and push back them out of some of China's lands that they ended up in. Failing in the north, in the south, but in the north. They head into northern Pakistan. With them having a bit of a breakthrough. With their forces cutting it off and meeting with Russian forces, and then, yes, this becomes the front. As they slowly advance south. With Islamabad falling. I said the city wrong. Well, they take Kabul. And this becomes the front line. With Russia managing to have a breakthrough in the south. With Europe pushing them back a bit. and in the Belarus front, but overall they're still in a good position, with China launching a fast speed attack into these areas, with them using a blitz kind of lightning to get through, lightning force. And after this advances really fast, doesn't slow down as they start moving into northern Korea. And they get to about capture Seoul, and then they get stuck, and then they take this island. Forces here working to secure the Caspian Sea, as under Russian control, they move. And then they take Turan, and with this, they connect these two fronts, with India managing to push them completely out of their lands. As the front starts becoming really bad. Not in all spots, especially in Southeast Asia, where they manage to land on Java and take over most of the population of the area. And then they move up and take the island of Jakarta, and at this point they're just island hopping, and Japanese forces decide to withdraw so they can hold on to Korea, which tends to be more important. But with this leads to more troops being up in this front. And the northern island falls, and the southern island of Japan falls. And they get advanced into. And they collapse as they get overran. But the southern part of Pakistan collapsing as they take Karachi and start moving into Iran. With them taking over Afghanistan somehow. Somehow they took over the graveyard of empire. And this becomes their front, with India and China sending some more forces up into the northern front, which is in Russia's front, with them failing to continue along this one front, as they manage to push them up north into Belarus and Lithuania. But in this front here, they start moving into Iraq, which gives them the advantage as they move into Syria, which is weakly defended, with them taking over Kuwait and them moving into Saudi Arabia. They manage to cut the forces off and move and take over Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. And then they land in Yemen and Oman, and then they start taking over the UAE. And at this point, after Riyadh falls, Saudi Arabia collapses. And well, Turkey starts collapsing as this becomes one of the main fronts, with Greece having to help, but they do a bad job. And well, then they move in and cross into Europe, with Russia focusing on taking the rest of the coastline of Ukraine, which they managed to do, and then they link up with the Asian forces as they move deeper into Greece, with Finland starting to struggle, being cut off in this area, with Sweden and Norway being invaded a bit until it stales out, and then they manage to take Helsinki. With this, they move towards further, but in the Balkan front, they get pushed back as they take the capital of Bulgaria and Bucharest. And while Belarus falls and these fronts collapse in Romania, with France, Britain, Germany, Italy, and Poland managing to hold pretty well at this point as they start getting pushed back, wanting a stalemate, but it's refused, as they manage to take over Hungary, with the counter-offensive breaking out in Poland. with this becoming the front. As they take over these islands and decide to take over Iceland. And then they make 2 landings. One is made in southern Italy, then one in Sardinia, and then one around Gibraltar, which manages to move up and take Lisbon, with Madrid then falling, and then the front stalling out of the Pyrenees Mountains, and then they take over Corsica, and they continue their offensive into Sweden, and then into Norway, with them managing to cross and take Venice, and then move in to take Rome, and taking parts of Spain, with this Germany looking a bit questionable, with them moving into Italy and Austria, try to keep the front together, with France struggling to hold back and ending up losing Bordeaux and some southern coastal cities, as they manage to lose Brittany. And they start getting closed in on as Germany falls back out of Poland. And then they fall out of Czechia, Austria, and whatever else they were holding. With Paris falling, and then France gives up. Switzerland ends up being taken over. Ireland gets taken over, followed by them taking over Britain. And followed by this. Chances are they couldn't do this, but let's say they did. And well, that's pretty much all for today's video. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Wild Mapper out, but not until you subscribe. Bye, guys!